The knock on the door was not loud, but it landed with the force of a battering ram, shaking the very foundation of the quiet, sun-drenched afternoon. It was a sound that did not belong in the placid, manicured world of Eleanor Vance Hartwell's life. In her sprawling, architect-designed home, visitors did not knock. They were announced by a discreet electronic chime. A knock was something crude, something from the outside world of untamed variables, and Eleanor despised it instantly. She was in the drawing room, a space of cool marble and muted silks, observing her daughter Chloe as she scrolled listlessly through her phone. Across the room, her sister Amelia sat on a stiff-backed chair, mending a tear in a small boy's trousers. The boy, Leo, sat at her feet, his attention fixed on the rhythmic pass of the needle. Eleanor looked at the scene, and a familiar wave of irritation washed over her. The quiet poverty of it, the sheer drabness of her sister's existence, was a stain on the otherwise perfect canvas of her home. "Someone's at the door," Chloe said, not looking up. Her voice was laced with the bored indifference of a 16-year-old who had never wanted for anything. "Marcus is in his study, he'll get it," Eleanor replied, her gaze still fixed on Amelia. She had taken her sister in 2 years ago, a supposed act of supreme generosity that she never tired of referencing in her social circle. Amelia had arrived with a single suitcase and a mountain of quiet grief after the loss of her husband. Eleanor had provided a roof, a small bedroom that was once a sewing room, and the unending burden of her charity. Later, Amelia had asked if she could also provide shelter for the son of a dear departed friend, a little boy left with no one. Eleanor had agreed, seeing another opportunity to burnish her philanthropic credentials. Leo, the little orphan, another project. The knock came again, firmer this time, an insistent, declarative sound. A sigh of theatrical exasperation escaped Eleanor's lips. "Honestly, can no one do anything?" She rose, the silk of her lounge trousers whispering against the floor. Her husband, Marcus, emerged from his study at the same moment, his face a mask of mild annoyance. "I'll see who it is," he said, striding towards the grand entryway. Eleanor followed, her curiosity piqued. Perhaps it was a delivery meant for a neighbor, a lost tourist. The possibilities were mundane, yet the sound had felt significant. She saw Marcus open the heavy oak door to reveal a man standing on the granite steps. He was tall, dressed in a suit of such impeccable cut and quality that it seemed to absorb the very light around it. He held a slim leather briefcase in one hand. He was not a delivery driver. He was not a lost tourist. He was, Eleanor registered with a sudden internal straightening of her own posture, someone important. "Good afternoon," the man said. His voice was calm, measured, and carried an undeniable weight of authority. "I am looking for the resident of this house." Marcus, ever the master of his domain, puffed out his chest slightly. "I am Marcus Hartwell. This is my home. How can I help you?" The man's eyes, a very clear and disconcerting shade of gray, flickered past Marcus for a moment, sweeping the opulent foyer before landing back on him. "My apologies, Mr. Hartwell. My business is not with you." He then looked directly at Eleanor, who had positioned herself just behind her husband's shoulder. "Nor with you, Mrs. Hartwell." Eleanor's perfectly sculpted eyebrows rose. The sheer audacity of the dismissal was stunning. Before she could formulate a suitably cutting response, the man's gaze shifted again, moving past them both, into the archway leading to the drawing room. His eyes found the small, quiet figure mending the trousers. "I am here," the lawyer stated, his voice resonating in the cavernous hall, "to see Ms. Amelia Vance." The statement landed in the silent air and hung there, preposterous and utterly incomprehensible. Chloe finally looked up from her phone, her brow furrowed. Marcus turned his head slowly, looking from the lawyer to his sister-in-law, as if trying to solve a complex equation with missing variables. But it was Eleanor's reaction that was most profound. A small, disbelieving laugh escaped her lips. "Amelia? You must be mistaken. She doesn't..." She has no business. The implication was clear. She has nothing. She is nothing. The lawyer's expression did not change. It remained one of polite, unshakable certainty. There is no mistake. It was at that moment that Amelia rose from her chair. She placed the trousers and sewing kit neatly on the seat, her movements unhurried and deliberate. She said a quiet word to Leo, who looked up at her with trusting eyes. Then she walked towards the foyer. She was not dressed in silk or designer labels, but in a simple cotton dress. Yet as she approached, she seemed to carry a stillness, a dignity that made the grandeur of the hall feel suddenly gaudy and insecure. She stopped before the lawyer, her expression calm, her posture poised. Eleanor watched, her mind reeling. She thought of a dinner just 1 week prior, a dinner that had perfectly encapsulated their entire dynamic. She had taken the family to Le Ciel, the city's most exclusive restaurant, to celebrate a minor business success for Marcus. She had made a grand show of ordering the Thermidor lobster for herself and Chloe, the Wagyu steak for Marcus. Then she had turned to Amelia and Leo. "Just a basket of the artisan bread for them, please," she had told the waiter with a magnanimous smile, loud enough for the nearby tables to hear. "And water. It's important to remember those less fortunate." Amelia had simply inclined her head, her face betraying nothing. She had taken a piece of the warm bread, broken it in half, and given the first piece to Leo. They had eaten their bread and drank their water, while lobster shells and steak bones piled up on the other side of the table. Eleanor had felt a surge of satisfaction, a perfect confirmation of the world as she understood it, a world of tiers, of hierarchies, where she sat at the top, dispensing charity from on high. Now, standing in her marble foyer, watching this impeccably dressed lawyer look at her sister with such profound respect, Eleanor felt the first tremor of a coming earthquake. She had thought her sister was a dependent, a charity case. She didn't know that the simple bread she had fed the orphan was an act not of poverty, but of principle. Within the next 10 minutes, Eleanor Hartwell's entire world, so carefully constructed and fiercely protected, would be brought to its knees by the one person she had never, ever considered to be a threat. We love telling stories that explore the hidden strengths people carry, stories where kindness and integrity win out over arrogance and pride. If you love them too, we'd be so grateful if you'd hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more content just like this. And let us know in the comments where you're watching from. It's always amazing to see how far these stories travel. Now let's get back to what happened when that door opened. The lawyer, whose name was Julian Davies, extended a hand to Amelia. "Miss Vance, it's a privilege to finally meet you in person. Mr. Sterling spoke of you often." Amelia took his hand. Her grip was firm, her eyes clear. "Mr. Davies, thank you for coming. I trust your journey was pleasant." The polite, formal exchange was so utterly out of place in the context of their family dynamic that it seemed to suck the air from the room. Eleanor stared, her mouth slightly agape. Mr. Sterling? The name meant nothing to her. She glanced at Marcus, who simply shrugged, his own confusion mirroring hers. "Entirely pleasant, thank you," Mr. Davies replied. "May we have a moment of privacy? What I have to discuss is of a sensitive and confidential nature." Amelia's gaze flickered towards Eleanor and Marcus. There was no triumph in her eyes, no hint of "I told you so." There was only a quiet, steady resolve. "Of course. Perhaps the study?" she suggested, her voice soft but firm, as if she were the one granting permission. The suggestion that she, Amelia, should usurp Marcus's private study was the final absurdity. Eleanor found her voice. "The study? Amelia, what is this all about? Who is this man? And who is Mr. Sterling?" Her tone was sharp, accusatory, the voice of a woman whose authority had been inexplicably challenged. Amelia turned to face her sister. For the first time, Eleanor saw a flicker of something in her sister's eyes. Not anger, but a profound and weary sadness. "Eleanor, please, this is a private matter." "Private? You live under my roof. Your life is my business." Eleanor snapped, the words tasting like acid. You and that boy are here because of my generosity. Do not forget that. Mister. Davies cleared his throat, a sound as clean and sharp as a gavel strike. With all due respect, Mrs. Hartwell, I believe you are operating under a number of significant misapprehensions. Ms. Vance's residential status is temporary, as is her financial situation. He turned to Amelia. Perhaps it is better to have this conversation with your family present. The documents I have will clarify everything. Amelia hesitated for a fraction of a second, her gaze falling on Leo, who had padded silently into the foyer and was now standing by her side, his small hand clutching the fabric of her dress. She placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. Very well, Mr. Davies. The drawing room, then. She led the way, not like a servant being summoned, but like a queen leading her court. Mr. Davies followed. A stunned Eleanor and a deeply unsettled Marcus trailed behind them, with Chloe bringing up the rear, her phone now forgotten in her pocket, her eyes wide with a dawning sense of drama that was far more interesting than anything on her social media feed. They settled back into the drawing room, the atmosphere now thick with unspoken questions and a humming, electric tension. Amelia sat not on the stiff-backed chair of her station, but on one of the plush silk sofas opposite Eleanor and Marcus. Leo curled up beside her, his head resting on her lap. Mr. Davies took a seat in an armchair, placing his briefcase on the glass coffee table between them. The clicks of the latches opening were like gunshots in the silence. Eleanor watched every movement, her mind racing. This had to be a mistake, a prank, a bizarre misunderstanding. Her sister was a widow with no prospects, a woman whose greatest ambition seemed to be patching old clothes and reading bedtime stories. She was kind, yes, and gentle, but those were not qualities the world rewarded. Power, wealth, status, those were the currencies that mattered, and Amelia possessed none of them. Eleanor had spent years reinforcing this fact, both to Amelia and to herself. Her sister's dependency was a cornerstone of her own identity. She remembered countless small humiliations, each one a careful brick in the wall that separated their stations. There was the matter of the car. When Amelia had first arrived, she'd asked if she might occasionally borrow Eleanor's second car, a perfectly respectable sedan, for errands. "Oh, Amelia, I'm afraid the insurance just doesn't cover it," Eleanor had lied smoothly. "It's far too complicated. The bus route is really quite convenient, you know. A little fresh air will do you good." And so Amelia and Leo had taken the bus, in rain and heat, while the sedan sat gleaming and unused in the three-car garage. Then there were the clothes. Eleanor's wardrobe was a monument to haute couture, with Chloe's fast fashion hauls not far behind. When new seasons arrived, Eleanor would make a show of clearing out her closet. She would present Amelia with a pile of her cast-offs, garments that were perhaps a season out of date or had been worn once too often. "I thought you might be able to make use of these," she would say, her voice dripping with condescending sweetness. "No sense in letting them go to waste." Amelia had always accepted them with a quiet, "Thank you," never pointing out that the clothes were often not her size or style, that the act was less about generosity and more about reinforcing her role as the recipient of scraps. She would take them, and later Eleanor would see the same garments, neatly folded, in the donation bin at the local charity shop. Eleanor's grip on the silk cushion beside her tightened. The memory of these moments, once so satisfying, now felt fragile. They were built on an assumption of her own superiority, an assumption that was currently being dismantled before her very eyes by a man in a $1,000 suit who had come to see her penniless sister. Mr. Davies drew a sheaf of documents from his briefcase. They were bound in a dark blue cover, embossed with a logo Eleanor didn't recognize, a stylized S entwined with a globe. "Before I begin," he said, his gaze sweeping over Eleanor and Marcus, "I must ask you to understand that the information I am about to disclose has been kept in the strictest confidence at my client's request, until this moment." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. My client was Mr. Alistair Sterling. The name again. Marcus leaned forward. Alistair Sterling? The CEO of Sterling Global? The recluse? I thought he had no family. He had no acknowledged family, Mr. Davies corrected gently. But he had a son, Leo. The world tilted on its axis. Eleanor's head whipped around to stare at the small boy nestled against her sister. Leo, the orphan, the charity case, the son of one of the wealthiest, most enigmatic men on the planet. It was impossible. It was ludicrous. Leo? She breathed, the name a whisper of disbelief. Amelia's hand stroked Leo's hair. She looked at Eleanor, her expression unreadable. His mother was my dearest friend, Clara. She and Alistair valued their privacy above all else. When she passed away, Alistair asked me to become Leo's guardian, in all but name, to give him a life away from the pressures of the Sterling name. He wanted him to have a normal childhood. A normal childhood? Eleanor's voice rose, bordering on a shriek. You brought him here to live like this? You let him be treated as an object of pity? The accusation was directed at Amelia, but the shame was her own, a hot, acrid taste in the back of her throat. She had pitied the heir to a multi-billion-dollar fortune. She had fed him bread while her own daughter ate lobster. The absurdity of it was a physical blow. Alistair knew everything, Eleanor, Amelia said, her voice quiet but unwavering. He knew how you treated us. He wanted Leo to see the world not from the top, but from the bottom. He wanted him to understand character, to see kindness and cruelty up close, to learn that a person's worth has nothing to do with what is on their plate or the label on their clothes. In her quiet room, late at night, long after the Hartwell house had fallen silent, Amelia Vance lived a second life. While Eleanor and Marcus slept, secure in their belief that Amelia's world was confined to their four walls, she was commanding a hidden empire. Her small Spartan room would transform into a global command center. The only tools she needed were a satellite phone, a heavily encrypted laptop, and the worn, leather-bound journal she kept with her at all times. To Eleanor, the journal was just another pitiable affectation. A diary where her sad little sister probably wrote sad little poems. She'd once seen it on Amelia's nightstand and felt a pang of contemptuous pity. How quaint, how pointless. She had no idea that the journal's pages were filled not with poetry, but with meticulously detailed notes on global market fluctuations, confidential reports on subsidiary performances, and strategic plans for corporate acquisitions. It contained passwords, private contact numbers for world leaders and financial titans, and handwritten instructions from Alistair Sterling himself. It was one of the most powerful documents on the planet, and it lived, unseen and utterly underestimated, in a former sewing room in Eleanor Hartwell's house. The late-night calls were a ritual. Amelia would sit by the window, looking out at the manicured lawns of her sister's estate, and speak in low, coded language to a man whose voice was electronically modulated for security. The Phoenix Division is reporting a 17% downturn, she might say, her voice a calm murmur. Their projections were over-leveraged. I've advised a strategic divestment. On the other end, Alistair Sterling's disguised voice would respond, Your instincts are sound, Amelia. Proceed. What of the Helios project in South America? The environmental impact reports are problematic. The local government is unstable. I've flagged it as a high-risk, low-yield venture. My recommendation is to redirect the capital into our renewable energy research. It's a longer game, but a more stable foundation. Excellent. You see the whole chessboard, my dear, not just the next move. These conversations were the anchor of Amelia's existence. Alistair Sterling had been her late husband's closest friend, a bond forged in their university days, long before the Sterling Empire was a reality. After her husband David had passed away, Alistair, already reclusive, had grown to rely on Amelia's judgment, her integrity, and her sharp, analytical mind, the very qualities David had so loved in her. When Clara, Leo's mother, died suddenly, Alistair's world had narrowed to two people, his son and Amelia. "I cannot raise him in this gilded cage, Amelia," he had told her, his voice raw with grief. "They will turn him into a commodity, a headline. I want him to know the world as it is. I want him to have what you and David had, a life built on substance, not spectacle." And so the plan was formed. Amelia, his most trusted advisor and the person he loved like a sister, would become Leo's de facto guardian. She would take him into the real world. Her own sister's home, ironically, provided the perfect cover. Eleanor's snobbery and obsession with appearances made her blind. She would see only what she wanted to see, a poor relation to be pitied and controlled. It was the perfect camouflage. Amelia and Leo could hide in plain sight. Amelia had agreed, for Leo's sake, and for Alistair's. She understood the lesson he wanted to teach his son, and so she played her part with unwavering commitment. She endured the indignities, the casual cruelties, the constant reminders of her supposed station. Each slight was a data point, a lesson for Leo that she would quietly discuss with him later. "Mrs. Hartwell was unkind today," Leo might say, his small face troubled after Chloe had mocked his worn-out shoes. Amelia would kneel down, her eyes level with his. "Yes, she was. And why do you think she did that, little owl?" "Because my shoes are old." "Is a person's goodness measured by their shoes?" "No," Leo would whisper. "No," Amelia would agree. "Some people, Leo, build their own sense of worth by trying to make others feel small. It is like a house built on sand. It looks tall for a moment, but it has no foundation. True strength, real worth, is built on kindness, on integrity, like a house built of stone." Every act of condescension from Eleanor was turned into a lesson on character. The donated clothes became a discussion on materialism. The bus rides became an opportunity to observe the vibrant tapestry of everyday life. The bread at the Lobster dinner became the most powerful lesson of all, a stark, unforgettable illustration of how wealth can breed a poverty of the spirit. Amelia documented it all in her journal, not as a list of grievances to fuel revenge, but as a report to Alistair. It was a chronicle of his son's education in humanity. In between notes on a multi-billion-dollar merger and a currency crisis in Asia, there would be an entry. "Leo shared his bread with a boy on the bus today. He said the boy looked hungry. His heart is good, Alistair. Your legacy is safe." In the weeks leading up to Mr. Davies's arrival, Alistair's health had taken a sudden, irreversible turn. His calls became shorter, his voice weaker, though his mind remained as sharp as ever. "The arrangements are all in place, Amelia," he had said in their last conversation, just 2 nights before the lawyer knocked on the door. "Davies knows what to do. The board has been prepared." "Alistair, don't talk like that," Amelia had whispered, a knot of grief tightening in her chest. "We must be realists," he'd countered gently. "I have lived my life on my own terms, and I will leave it on them. You have been my greatest friend, Amelia, my partner. You have given my son a gift I never could, a foundation of stone. Now you must build the house." He had coughed, a dry, rattling sound. "Don't let them see you coming, my dear. The quiet ones are always the most dangerous." Those were his last words to her. 2 days later, as she sat mending Leo's trousers, she felt a profound sense of stillness, a shift in the world. She knew, even before the knock on the door, that Alistair was gone. She was no longer just a secret advisor, she was the executor. The plan was now in motion. And as she watched her sister's perfect world begin to fracture, she felt not a shred of triumph, only a deep, resonant sorrow for all the things Eleanor was about to lose, and a quiet resolve to honor the trust that had been placed in her. The annual Hartwell Foundation Charity Gala was Eleanor's Super Bowl. It was the glittering apex of her social year, a night where she could perform her favorite role, the benevolent queen, the compassionate philanthropist, on the grandest possible stage. This year the theme was a beacon of hope, and the ballroom of the city's most luxurious hotel was decorated in shimmering gold and white. Hundreds of the city's elite had paid thousands of dollars a plate to attend, their presence a testament to Eleanor's social power. For Amelia, the gala was always the most challenging night of the year. It was an exercise in extreme public humiliation, orchestrated by her sister with surgical precision. This year was no different. Eleanor had insisted Amelia and Leo attend. "It's important for our donors to see the faces of those we help," she'd explained, her voice oozing with false sincerity. "You'll be my guest of honor, of sorts." The role of guest of honor involved standing near the entrance for an hour as the other guests arrived. Eleanor would drape an arm around Amelia's shoulders, pulling her into conversations with banking moguls and society doyens. "This is my dear, brave sister, Amelia," she would announce, "and this is little Leo. We've taken them in, of course. It's the least one can do. Family is everything, isn't it?" The guests would murmur their approval, their eyes flicking over Amelia's simple, off-the-rack dress, a stark contrast to Eleanor's custom-made couture gown, and Leo's neatly pressed but obviously inexpensive suit. They saw exactly what Eleanor wanted them to see, a tableau of her own magnificent generosity. Amelia stood through it all, her expression serene, her posture perfect. She would meet their pitying or condescending gazes with a calm, direct look that seemed to quietly unnerve them. She held Leo's hand, a small, warm anchor in a sea of glittering artifice. She was playing her part in Alistair's plan. "Let them underestimate you," he had always said. "Let them see only what their own prejudices allow." The peak of the humiliation came during Eleanor's keynote speech. A massive screen behind the stage played a professionally produced video filled with dramatic music and images of suffering, followed by smiling shots of Eleanor cutting ribbons and shaking hands. Then Eleanor herself stepped to the podium, bathed in a single golden spotlight. "We are here tonight," she began, her voice trembling with practiced emotion, "because we believe in lifting others up. We believe that to whom much is given, much is expected. I am reminded of this duty every single day when I look at my own family." The spotlight operator, clearly on cue, swung the beam from Eleanor to find Amelia and Leo at their designated table in the back of the ballroom, near the kitchens. The light was blinding. Hundreds of heads turned to stare. Amelia did not flinch. She simply placed a reassuring hand on Leo's arm. "My sister Amelia has faced unimaginable hardship," Eleanor continued, her voice ringing with theatrical pity. "And when she needed a safe harbor, a beacon of hope, our family was there. We opened our home and our hearts to her and to young Leo, a dear boy who has known so much loss." The room erupted in applause. It was a masterful performance. Eleanor was not just a philanthropist, she was a saint, canonized in real time before an audience of her peers. Marcus, seated at the head table, beamed with pride. Chloe, for her part, looked mortified, but for different reasons. She was embarrassed by the public display of what she considered their family's dirty laundry. Amelia felt the heat of 1,000 eyes on her. She could feel their judgment, their pity, their admiration for her sister. In that moment, she was not a person. She was a prop, a symbol of Eleanor's virtue. She looked down at Leo, whose face was buried in her side, shielding his eyes from the light. She smoothed his hair, her touch a silent promise. "This will end soon. The foundation of stone is almost complete." Later that evening, as the gala wound down, a man approached their table. He was one of Marcus's business partners, a property developer named George Finley, a man known for his abrasive manner and wandering hands. He was slightly drunk. "Well, well," he slurred, leaning over their table, his eyes fixed on Amelia. "Eleanor's little charity project. You clean up all right." He reached out, his hand closing on her arm. "You must be very grateful to her. Very grateful." Before Amelia could react, Leo, who had been quiet all night, suddenly stood up on his chair. His small face was fierce. "Do not touch her," he said. His voice was not a child's shout, but a low, commanding tone that was a startling echo of his father's. Finley, taken aback, laughed. "Quite the little guard dog, aren't you?" He dropped his hand, but his sneer remained. "Know your place, kid." Amelia gently pulled Leo back down. She stood up, her eyes meeting Finley's. "Thank you for your concern, Mr. Finley," she said, her voice icy calm. "But we were just leaving." She took Leo's hand and walked away, her back straight, leaving the developer looking flustered and foolish. As they waited in the hotel lobby for the taxi Eleanor had so generously ordered for them, refusing, of course, to let them ride in her chauffeured limousine, Amelia knelt before Leo. "You were very brave," she said softly. "He was a bad man," Leo stated. "Yes, he was. But you must never let a bad man's actions make you become like him. We don't answer ugliness with more ugliness. We answer it with dignity. Do you understand?" Leo nodded, his fierce expression softening as he looked into her eyes. "I understand, Leah." Back in her small room late that night, Amelia opened her leather journal. She didn't write about the public humiliation or George Finley's crassness. She didn't need to. Those were merely symptoms of the disease. Instead, she turned to a fresh page and made a series of calm, methodical notes. Under the heading, Finley Developments, she wrote, "Over-leveraged in the commercial sector. Significant exposure to high-interest loans from Sterling-owned subsidiary Apex Banking. Vulnerable to a margin call." Under Hartwell Imports, Marcus's company, she wrote, "Primary credit line extended by Apex Banking, personally guaranteed by Eleanor Hartwell's signature against their private assets. Renewal date approaching." She then flipped to another section, a list of names. She drew a neat line through George Finley. She paused for a moment, her pen hovering over Marcus Hartwell. Not yet. The final pieces were not yet in place. She closed the journal. The gala had not been an ordeal. It had been a final data-gathering mission. It had confirmed the arrogance, the blindness, the utter certainty of the people in that room that their world was indestructible. They were dancing on a floor of glass, admiring their own reflections, with no idea of the stone that was about to be dropped. The beacon of hope Eleanor had spoken of was coming, but it was not her, and it would not shine on her. It would be a cold, clear light of reckoning, and it would expose every shadow, every crack in their gilded, hollow lives. The scene repeats, but now every detail is imbued with a terrifying new significance. The sun-drenched afternoon, the cool marble, the quiet domesticity, it all feels like a stage set waiting for the curtain to rise on the final act. The knock on the door is no longer just a sound. It is the striking of a clock, signaling an end. When Mr. Davies says, "I am here to see Ms. Amelia Vance," the words detonate in the silent foyer, and the shockwave ripples through the house. Eleanor's disbelieving laugh is the sound of a reality cracking under pressure. Marcus's confusion is the dawning horror of a man realizing the map he's been reading is upside down. Amelia's walk from the drawing room to the foyer is a paradigm shift in motion. Every quiet, graceful step is a reclamation of power. She is no longer the drab little sister in a cotton dress. She is a woman moving toward her destiny, and the opulent house seems to shrink around her, its grandeur exposed as a fragile facade. The procession into the drawing room is a funeral march for the Hartwells' world. They are following Amelia, a silent admission of a change in the hierarchy that they don't yet understand, but can feel in their bones. When Mr. Davies opens his briefcase, the click of the latches is the sound of a vault being opened, a Pandora's box of truths that will now be unleashed. His calm, methodical demeanor is more terrifying than any outburst of anger could be. He is not an aggressor, he is a messenger, an instrument of a fate that has already been decided. "As I was saying," Mr. Davies continues, his voice unwavering in the face of the family's collective shock, My client was Mr. Alistair Sterling. He lets the name settle again. For the past 5 years, following the death of his partner, Clara Bell, Mr. Sterling has been in declining health. During that time, he entrusted the majority of the day-to-day strategic oversight of his primary holding company, Sterling Global, to a proxy, a trusted advisor who held his complete confidence. He pauses, his gray eyes moving from Eleanor to Marcus, then finally resting on Amelia. That advisor was your sister, Ms. Amelia Vance. A choked sound escapes Eleanor's throat. It is a sound of pure, unadulterated disbelief. That's impossible. She mends trousers. She takes the bus. The protest is feeble, pathetic, a child's argument against the tide. She did those things, Mr. Davies corrected gently, to honor the primary wish of Mr. Sterling, that his son Leo be raised in an environment free from the corrupting influence of extreme wealth, an environment where he could learn the value of character over currency. He gestures towards the documents on the table. Mr. Sterling passed away peacefully 2 days ago. These documents represent his last will and testament, as well as the charter for the trust he established. He slides the top document across the glass table. It's the will. The font is crisp, the language dense and legalistic, but a few key phrases leap out. I, Alistair Sterling, being of sound mind and body, bequeath my entire personal and financial estate, including all shares, properties, and assets held by Sterling Global and its subsidiaries, to a trust established for the sole benefit of my son, Leo Sterling, formerly known as Leo Bell. Marcus, a businessman, understands the implications faster than Eleanor. His face goes pale, a waxy, sickly color. He sees the name of the holding company, Sterling Global, and his mind is already racing, connecting dots that are forming a terrifying constellation. But the trust, Marcus stammers, his voice barely a whisper. Who controls it? A bank? A board? This is the moment, the quiet before the storm. Amelia, who has been silent, stroking Leo's hair, finally looks up. Her eyes meet Marcus's, and for the first time he sees not the meek, pitiable sister-in-law, but the woman Alistair Sterling trusted to run his empire. He sees the steel. Mr. Davies answers his question. Mr. Sterling's instructions were unequivocal. He believed that a board could be bought and that a bank could be pressured. He wanted a single individual, someone whose integrity was, in his words, unimpeachable, someone who had been tested and proven. He slides a second document across the table. It is the trust charter. The key appointment is on the first page. He named a sole executor for his estate, a single trustee to administer the trust, and the legal guardian for his son Leo, with full and indisputable authority over all assets until Leo reaches the age of 25. Mr. Davies looks directly at Amelia. A flicker of a smile, the first he has shown, touches his lips. Congratulations, Ms. Vance. As of 9 a.m. yesterday morning, you are, for all intents and purposes, the acting CEO and chairman of the board of Sterling Global, and one of the wealthiest and most powerful women in the world. The statement landed. Simple, devastating, final. Silence. A profound, absolute silence that was heavier than any sound. The world had not just tilted, it had inverted. The bottom was now the top. The servant was now the queen. The woman who was given bread was now the owner of the entire banquet. Eleanor stared, her face a frozen mask of incomprehension. Her brain simply could not process the information. Amelia? The woman she had mocked, belittled, and used as a social prop? It was a joke. It had to be a joke. But the look on the lawyer's face was not joking. And the look on Amelia's face, that was the most terrifying thing of all. It was a look of quiet, sorrowful acceptance. It was the look of truth. Chloe, for her part, was staring at her cousin Leo with a new, awestruck expression. The quiet little boy she had sometimes teased and often ignored was not an orphan. He was royalty of a kind. He was the prince, and her unassuming Aunt Amelia was the regent. Her teenage mind, accustomed to the drama of television shows, was suddenly living in one. But it was Marcus whose reaction was the most visceral. He made a small, strangled noise and leaned back in his chair as if he'd been physically struck. His mind was a whirlwind of panic. Apex banking, the credit line, the renewal date, the personal guarantee, Eleanor's signature, his signature. They hadn't just insulted Amelia, they had built their entire financial house on a foundation of sand, and she now held the deed to the sand. "No," Eleanor whispered. The word was a prayer, a denial against the encroaching reality. "No, there must be a mistake. She tricked him. An old, sick man. She took advantage of him." Mr. Davies' expression hardened. The polite facade dropped, revealing a core of cold, hard steel. "Mrs. Hartwell, I advise you to be extremely careful with your words. Ms. Vance was Mr. Sterling's most trusted partner for nearly a decade. She was intimately involved in every major decision the company has made. The board, the world's financial leaders, they all know of her, even if they never knew her name. They knew her as Ariadne, Mr. Sterling's anonymous strategic genius. The only people in the world who were unaware of her true position, it seems, were her own family. The use of the code name, Ariadne, was a final, devastating blow. It painted a picture of a secret life so complex and important that Eleanor couldn't even begin to fathom it. Her sister wasn't just wealthy, she was a legend hiding in plain sight. Amelia finally spoke. Her voice was soft, but it cut through the tension like a blade. "Eleanor," she said, her gaze finding her sister's. "There was no trick. There was only a promise. A promise I made to a dear friend to protect his son and his legacy." She stood up, pulling a sleeping Leo gently into her arms. The boy was heavy, but she held him as if he weighed nothing. She looked around the room, at the silk, the marble, the art. She looked at it all as if seeing it for the first time, or perhaps the last. "Mr. Davies," she said, turning to the lawyer, "thank you for handling this with such discretion. My son and I will need to make some arrangements. We will be vacating this house by the end of the day." Vacating. The word was so simple, so final. She wasn't being thrown out, she was leaving. It was her choice. "Of course, Miss Vance," the lawyer said, standing as well. "A car is waiting for you. Your new residence has been prepared for weeks, per Mr. Sterling's instructions. All of your personal effects from your old life, the one before you came here, have already been moved from storage." Her old life. Another revelation. Eleanor had assumed Amelia's life with her husband had been one of modest means. The idea that she had possessions in storage, a life that existed before and outside of Eleanor's charity, had never even occurred to her. Amelia nodded. She started to walk towards the door, Leo still asleep in her arms. As she passed Eleanor, she paused. Her sister was still frozen, her eyes wide with a mixture of horror, envy, and a dawning, terrible understanding. "The lobster you ordered for Chloe last week," Amelia said, her voice a near whisper, for Eleanor's ears only. "It was from a fishery owned by a Sterling subsidiary. The restaurant, La Cio, sits in a building owned by a Sterling real estate trust. The bank that holds your mortgage, Eleanor, it is also owned by Sterling Global." She didn't need to say anything more. She had just handed her sister a map of her own destruction. Every luxury, every trapping of the life Eleanor had built to prove her superiority was in fact owned by the very person she had sought to diminish. Amelia walked out of the drawing room without a backward glance. A moment later, the front door opened and closed with a quiet, final click. She was gone. The silence she left behind was a living entity. It was filled with the ghosts of unspoken cruelties, the echoes of 1,000 small moments of arrogance. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Eleanor let out a sound, a terrible, dry sob that was ripped from the very depths of her soul. It was not a sound of grief or sadness. It was the sound of a queen realizing her castle was made of paper and the rain had just begun to fall. Marcus finally broke the paralysis. He lunged for his phone, his fingers trembling as he frantically tried to bring up his company's financial portal. His face was ashen. He didn't need to see the numbers. He already knew what they would say. He was ruined. They were ruined. He looked at his wife, whose perfect, composed face had finally crumbled, revealing the terrified, insecure woman beneath. She was staring at the empty space where Amelia had stood, as if she could still see the ghost of the sister she thought she knew. "What have you done?" Marcus whispered, the words ragged. "What have we done?" But Eleanor didn't answer. She was lost in the echo of Amelia's final words. "The bank that holds your mortgage." She thought of the bread, the simple, peasant bread she had forced upon her sister and the billionaire's heir. It was meant to be a symbol of her power and their powerlessness. Instead, it had become a symbol of her own blindness, her own spectacular, world-shattering foolishness. The taste of ashes filled her mouth. The days that followed were a masterclass in quiet, efficient dismantling. There were no angry phone calls, no dramatic confrontations. Amelia did not wield her newfound power like a cudgel. She wielded it like a scalpel, with precision, detachment, and an unnerving silence. The Hartwells' world did not explode. It was simply, methodically, deconstructed. The first letter arrived 3 days after Amelia's departure. It was from Apex Banking. It was printed on heavy, cream-colored bond paper, the kind reserved for significant news. The letter, written in dense but unambiguous legalese, informed Marcus Hartwell that, following a strategic review of their commercial lending portfolio, the bank had decided not to renew Hartwell Imports' primary line of credit. Furthermore, due to clauses related to high-risk exposure, a term so vague and terrifying it could mean anything, the full balance of the loan was now due within 30 days. Marcus read the letter 3 times, his hands shaking. The amount was staggering. It was more liquid capital than his company had, or could ever hope to raise in a month. Without that credit line, he couldn't pay his suppliers. He couldn't meet payroll. Hartwell Imports, the company his father had built, and that he had expanded into a symbol of his own success, was a house of cards, and someone had just removed the bottom row. He tried to call his contact at the bank, a man he'd golfed with for years. The man's secretary informed him that Mr. Peterson was in a meeting. He remained in that meeting for the rest of the day and the day after. His calls were never returned. He was being frozen out. The cold, impersonal machinery of the Sterling Empire was turning against him, and he was utterly powerless to stop it. 2 days after that, the second wave of the assault began. Chloe was at a boutique with friends, her mother's platinum credit card in hand. When she went to pay for a ludicrously expensive handbag, the card was declined. The cashier, who knew Chloe by name, tried it again. Declined. A second card, a different bank. Declined. Flushed with a humiliation she had never before experienced, Chloe fled the store, leaving her friends whispering behind her. Eleanor, upon hearing the news, went into a controlled panic. She called the credit card companies, her voice dripping with the imperious tone she reserved for service workers. She was met not with apologies, but with cool, polite stonewalling. "There appears to be a flag on the account, Mrs. Hartwell. Our risk department has placed a temporary hold. We can send you a letter with more details within 7 to 10 business days." It was the language of corporate execution. Eleanor, who had lived her entire life on the privileged side of these conversations, was suddenly on the receiving end. She was no longer a valued client, she was a liability. The final, most devastating blow came a week later. A registered letter from the legal firm of Davies, Thorne, and Sterling. It was a foreclosure notice. Since the primary loan for Hartwell Imports had been personally guaranteed by Marcus and Eleanor against their private assets, and since the loan was now in default, the bank was exercising its right to seize the collateral. The primary asset listed was their home. They had 60 days to vacate the premises. The house. It was more than just a home to Eleanor. It was the stage for her life, the physical manifestation of her status. Every piece of marble, every silk curtain, every commissioned piece of art was a testament to her success, her taste, her superiority. The thought of losing it was like the thought of losing a limb. This was the point where Eleanor's denial finally shattered, replaced by a desperate, clawing rage. "She's doing this to destroy us," she seethed, pacing the drawing room that would soon no longer be hers. "This is revenge, cruel, vindictive revenge." "Is it?" Marcus asked, his voice hollow. He was sitting in his expensive leather armchair, but he looked small and defeated, a king deposed. "Or is it just business? We defaulted. The bank is collecting. This is what happens. We just never thought it would happen to us." He looked at his wife, his eyes filled with a clarity born of absolute ruin. "She's not being cruel, Eleanor. She's just letting the consequences play out. The consequences of how we lived, of how we treated her." Eleanor refused to accept it. She began to work the phones, calling every friend, every acquaintance, every person who had ever eaten her canapes and applauded her speeches. She was met with a wall of polite excuses and sudden coldness. The news of Hartwell Imports' collapse was already rippling through the city's elite circles. But it was more than that. The story of Amelia Vance, the secret power behind the Sterling throne, had also begun to leak, whispered in boardrooms and over expensive lunches. No one wanted to be caught on the wrong side of that story. Siding with the Hartwells was now social and financial suicide. The doors that had always been open to Eleanor were now slamming shut in her face, one by one. Her social currency, once limitless, was now worthless. Chloe was experiencing her own version of this social death at school. Her friends, whose loyalty was measured in brand names and vacation spots, began to drift away. The whispers in the hallways were brutal. She was no longer Chloe Hartwell, the popular girl. She was the girl whose family was losing everything. For the first time in her life, she felt the sting of exclusion, the same sting she had so often inflicted on others, including Leo. The irony was a bitter pill to swallow. Amidst the wreckage of their lives, a for sale sign was hammered into the pristine lawn of their mansion. It was the ultimate public symbol of their fall from grace. Cars would slow down as they passed, the occupants staring, whispering. Eleanor would watch from the window, her face a mask of fury and shame. She was now the object of pity and gossip, the very thing she had always despised. Amelia, meanwhile, was silent. Her name was not in the papers. She gave no interviews. The world of high finance knew a new power was at the helm of Sterling Global, but the public face remained that of the late Alistair Sterling. She was moving pieces on a global chessboard from a quiet, elegant office in the Sterling Tower, the same office from which she had orchestrated this quiet, devastating coup. She wasn't punishing her sister. She was simply balancing the books. And the Hartwells, she had determined, were a debt that had finally come due. The day they were scheduled to meet Amelia was gray and drizzling, the sky weeping apathetic tears onto the city. Eleanor and Marcus Hartwell, stripped of their chauffeured cars and designer armor, took a taxi to the Sterling Tower, a gleaming black monolith that scraped the clouds. The irony was so thick it was suffocating. They were traveling like commoners to beg for mercy from the woman they had treated like a servant, in a building her power had built. The lobby was a cathedral of wealth and power, a vast expanse of black granite and soaring glass. A receptionist with the poise of a diplomat directed them to a private elevator. As they ascended, the silence was thick with Marcus's despair and Eleanor's simmering rage. "Remember, Eleanor," Marcus said, his voice low and tense, "we are here to ask for help, not to make accusations. Our entire future depends on this." "You want me to grovel?" Eleanor snapped, her voice a harsh whisper. "Yes," Marcus replied, his tone shockingly blunt. "That is exactly what I want. It's what we have to do. It's time to pay the ferryman. So, for once in your life, swallow your pride." The elevator doors opened directly into a reception area that was larger than their former drawing room. It was minimalist, elegant, and silent. A woman with a serene smile led them through a set of frosted glass doors into an office. The office was vast, with a floor-to-ceiling window that offered a godlike view of the city below. The rain streaked down the glass, making the world outside look blurred and insignificant. Amelia was not sitting behind the enormous mahogany desk. She was standing by the window, looking down at the city. Beside her on a small table sat her worn, leather-bound journal, the symbolic object, the source of it all. She turned as they entered. She was dressed in a simple but exquisitely tailored gray dress, her hair pulled back neatly. She looked powerful, calm, and completely in control. The meek, downtrodden sister was gone, replaced by this formidable stranger. "Eleanor, Marcus," she said. Her voice was even, betraying no emotion. "Thank you for coming. Please, sit." She gestured to two chairs that had been placed before the desk, chairs for supplicants. They sat. The leather was soft, but the chairs felt like judgment seats. For a long moment, Amelia simply looked at them, her gaze analytical, almost distant. It was the look of a strategist assessing a problem. Finally, she spoke. "You have lost your house," she began, stating it not as a question, but as a fact. "Your credit is gone. Marcus, your company is insolvent. Your social standing, Eleanor, has evaporated. You are, by the world's standards, ruined." Eleanor flinched at the brutal summary, but Marcus just nodded, his head bowed. It was the truth. "I imagine," Amelia continued, her voice still unnervingly calm, "that you believe I did this to you, that this was an act of revenge." "Wasn't it?" Eleanor choked out, the words escaping before she could stop them. Amelia's gaze settled on her sister. There was no anger in her eyes, only a deep, profound weariness. "No, revenge is a fire that consumes the person who wields it. This was not revenge. This was an audit, a balancing of accounts. You and Marcus built a life on a foundation of debt, both financial and moral. I simply called the debt due." She walked over to the desk and picked up the journal. She held it not as a weapon, but as a piece of evidence. "For 2 years I lived in your home, and for 2 years I kept a record." Eleanor's blood ran cold. The diary. "Not a record of my feelings," Amelia clarified, as if reading her mind. "A record of facts, a logbook of my son's education, an education in character provided, unwittingly, by you." She opened the journal. "Let me share a few entries with you. September 12th. Eleanor informed me that the insurance on her second car was too complicated to include me, suggesting I take the bus for fresh air. The sedan was not used for the following 11 days. Lesson for Leo. A convenient lie is often used to maintain a comfortable power dynamic." Marcus closed his eyes. "October 3rd, Amelia read on, her voice a soft, relentless cadence. "Chloe mocked Leo's shoes, calling them hobo shoes. Eleanor overheard and said nothing. Lesson for Leo. Silence in the face of cruelty is complicity. It is a form of endorsement." November 21st. Eleanor gifted me a box of her old clothes, many of which were damaged or ill-fitting, in front of her friends. A performance of charity. Lesson for Leo. An act of giving designed to elevate the giver and diminish the receiver is not generosity. It is an exercise in ego. She turned a page. January 8th, the Charity Gala. Eleanor put us on display like zoo animals, using our presence to bolster her reputation as a philanthropist. Lesson for Leo. Public virtue can often mask private cruelty. The loudest declarations of goodness often come from the most hollow hearts. She paused, her eyes lifting from the page to meet Eleanor's. And then there was the dinner, the lobster and the bread. You thought you were teaching me my place. You thought you were showing your daughter what power looked like. But the real lesson that night was for my son. He learned that a person can be surrounded by lavish food and still be starving for kindness. He learned that true poverty is not a lack of money, it is a lack of empathy. Amelia closed the journal and placed it back on the desk. The silence in the room was absolute, broken only by the sound of the rain against the glass. She had not raised her voice. She had not used a single word of insult. She had simply held up a mirror, a perfect, unsparing mirror, and forced them to look at their own reflections. "I did not do this to hurt you," Amelia said finally. Alistair Sterling built an empire, but he knew its greatest weakness was that it could fall into the hands of people like you. People who believe that wealth is a license for cruelty. He wanted his son to be immune to that disease. Your home was the testing ground, and you, Eleanor, you were the control group. The clinical, detached phrasing was the most devastating blow of all. She had not even been a worthy adversary. She had been an experiment. Marcus finally looked up, his face etched with a shame so profound it was painful to witness. "What do you want from us, Amelia?" he asked, his voice hoarse. Amelia's expression softened for the first time. The cold strategist receded, and a hint of the sister she once was returned. "From you, Marcus, I want nothing. From Eleanor, I want her to understand." She walked back to the window, her back to them. "The world you built has been dismantled. You cannot live there anymore. But I am not my sister. I will not leave you with nothing." She turned back, her face resolute. "I have arranged for a small, two-bedroom apartment for you in a modest but clean building downtown. I have also arranged for 2 entry-level positions at a logistics subsidiary of Sterling Global, located in the same area. The pay is enough to cover rent and groceries, but not luxuries. There will be no more lobster dinners." She paused, letting the offer sink in. "This is not a punishment. It is an opportunity. A chance to build a life based on something real, on work, on humility, on the value of a dollar earned through honest labor. It is a chance for Chloe to grow up in a world where her worth is not defined by the brand of her handbag. The offer is contingent," she added, "on one thing, that you, both of you, and Chloe, agree to family counseling, to speak with a professional about the values and behaviors that brought you to this place." It was not mercy. It was not revenge. It was a path, a hard, steep, and humbling path back to a life of substance. "The choice is yours," Amelia said, her voice softening. "You can accept this and begin the long, difficult work of rebuilding your character. Or you can refuse and take your chances with what little you have left. You have 24 hours to decide." She had laid it all out, their fall, the reasons for it, and their only possible salvation. The power was now, as it had always been, in their hands. The choice was between clinging to the shattered remnants of their pride or embracing the painful, terrifying, and perhaps redemptive gift of humility. The rain continued to fall outside, washing the city clean. Months passed. The relentless churn of the city moved on, and the dramatic fall of the Hartwells became old news, replaced by new scandals and new fortunes. But for the family at the center of the story, time had slowed down, measured now in small, difficult steps. Marcus accepted Amelia's offer without hesitation. The day he walked into the logistics warehouse for his first shift as a dispatch coordinator was the most humbling day of his life. His former business associates were now managing directors. He was now managing shipping manifests in a cramped, windowless office. But a strange thing happened. Stripped of the pressure to maintain a facade of wealth and power, he began to feel a sense of relief. The work was honest. His colleagues, working-class men and women, judged him not by his defunct credit line, but by his work ethic. He learned their names, their stories. For the first time in his adult life, he was simply Marcus, not Marcus Hartwell, CEO. He was earning his bread, and it tasted sweeter than any steak he had ever eaten at La Ciel. Chloe's transformation was perhaps the most remarkable. Forced to move to a small apartment and attend a public school, she was initially consumed by bitterness and shame. But stripped of her social status, she was forced to see the world and herself through a new lens. The therapy sessions, which she had first resisted, began to break down the walls of entitlement her parents had so carefully constructed. She saw how her mother's obsession with appearances had poisoned their family. She remembered Leo, the quiet cousin she had dismissed, and felt a pang of genuine remorse. On her own initiative, she began volunteering at a local community center, the same one Amelia and Leo used to visit on the bus. She found a quiet satisfaction in helping others, a feeling that no designer handbag had ever given her. Eleanor was the last to bend. For weeks, she remained in the small apartment like a caged lioness, refusing the job Amelia had offered, refusing to accept her new reality. She spent her days in a bitter haze, mourning her lost kingdom. It was Marcus, in a moment of quiet strength she had never seen in him, who finally broke through. "This is our life now, Eleanor," he told her one evening, his hands rough from a day's work. "You can either live it, or you can let your pride poison you to death in this room. Amelia gave us a chance, not a handout, a chance, to be better. For Chloe's sake, if not for our own, it's time to take it." The next day, Eleanor Hartwell, the former queen of society, walked into the logistics company and started work as an administrative assistant. Her tasks were mundane: filing, answering phones, making coffee. Every moment was a humiliation. Her perfectly manicured nails were broken. Her designer clothes were replaced with a sensible blouse and trousers. But as the weeks turned into months, the hard shell of her pride began to crack. She saw Marcus finding a sense of peace she'd never seen in him. She saw Chloe smiling a genuine smile for the first time in years. Slowly, grudgingly, she began to do the work. The real work. The work on herself. Amelia kept her distance, allowing them the dignity to walk their own path. She received regular reports from the therapist and from the supervisors at the logistics company. She read them in her silent, soaring office, her expression thoughtful. Her own life had changed dramatically, yet in its essence, it remained the same. She and Leo now lived in a beautiful, sprawling penthouse apartment atop the Sterling Tower. But it was a home, not a showroom. It was filled with books, art that Leo had painted, and the comfortable mess of a life being lived. Their meals were often simple, healthy dishes they cooked together in the state-of-the-art kitchen. There was no lobster, not because they couldn't afford it, but because it was never what they valued. One evening, Amelia and Leo were sitting on a large balcony overlooking the glittering expanse of the city. They were sharing a bowl of simple pasta, the lights of the world twinkling below them like a fallen constellation. "Leah," Leo asked, his voice now that of a confident young boy, "are Aunt Eleanor and Uncle Marcus poor now?" Amelia looked at him, at his clear, intelligent eyes, so like his father's. She considered her answer carefully. "They have less money, yes," she said, "but I don't know if they are poorer. Sometimes, Leo, you have to lose everything you think is valuable to discover what truly is. Your father wanted you to know that true wealth isn't in a bank account. It's here." She placed a hand over his heart. "It's in your character. It's in your kindness, your integrity, your ability to see the good in people." She looked out at the city, at the thousands of windows, each one containing a story. "Your aunt and uncle are on a new journey now, a harder one. My hope is that they are on the path to becoming very wealthy, in the way that truly matters." The story of Eleanor and Amelia is a powerful reminder that our true value is not determined by our possessions, our status, or the judgment of others. It's measured in our actions, our integrity, and the quiet dignity with which we treat those around us. It teaches us that the most powerful people are not always the loudest, and that true strength often lies hidden beneath a surface of humility and patience. What do you think? Do you believe that Eleanor and her family deserve the path Amelia set for them? Was it justice, or was it a subtle form of revenge? We would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Your perspective is what makes this community so special. Thank you for joining us for this story. If it resonated with you, please give this video a like and subscribe to our channel for more stories of quiet strength and ultimate vindication. We are so grateful for your support. Until next time, remember to be kind, for everyone you meet is fighting a hard battle.